Hello, welcome. My name is Christiane Sanderson. I am a retired senior lecturer in psychology at the University of Roehampton. And my area of work over the last 35 years is in child sexual abuse, sexual violence, domestic violence, and complex trauma. I'm really delighted to have been asked to deliver some training on child sexual abuse. And one of the things that I think is going to be really important for us to look at is the nature of child sexual abuse and some very recent research that shows increasingly child sexual abuse is being committed by other children. Recent data here in the UK indicates that 52% of cases that come to the attention of the authority of child sexual abuse is committed by other children, and also the sibling sexual abuse. So what I'm hoping to do in the training is to give an outline of the range of child sexual abuse, including the intergenerational transmission of child sexual abuse, and the impact this has on the child and later adult. With that in mind, I intend to look at the process of grooming, not just the child, but also adults in the child's life. I will look at the nature of being made to feel complicit and blaming the self for being sexually abused, for having caused it, but also look at the impact with regard to shame. Shame is a very powerful silencer. The more the child, the individual feels ashamed, they're less likely to disclose. And also the nature of dissociation, different types of dissociation, and how this becomes a protective strategy for the child in order to manage the impact of the abuse. So we'll be looking at the nature of child sexual abuse, the impact it has, and how we might work with that. Child sexual abuse is a form of complex trauma, and sometimes that manifests as developmental trauma in childhood, or it can be delayed trauma. This is especially the case in children who were sexually abused by a sibling or sexually abused by a peer. They often normalize what's happened to them and don't realize until they come into adulthood that this was actually traumatic. So we need to understand the impact, delayed trauma as well as complex trauma that we might see in our clinical setting. And one of the things we'll be looking at is how to work with child sexual abuse within the context of trauma. And with that in mind, I will be introducing firstly, the power threat meaning framework, which is an alternative framework to psychiatric diagnosis, which emphasizes what has happened to the person rather than focusing on the symptoms. So it's not what is wrong with them, but what has happened to them. And alongside is understanding symptoms as protective strategies that help them to survive. Having to adapt their personality, having to adapt their sense of self is a crucial aspect of being able to survive living under prolonged threat. It also emphasizes empowerment. I will also then look at the trauma-informed practice model and look at the basic principles of that. And the purpose of the trauma-informed practice model is that it doesn't necessarily replace the modality that you already use. What it does, it acts as a scaffold. It supports your modality, but it introduces some of the things we need to have in mind to ensure that we don't replicate the very dynamics that are inherent in the sexual abuse. So we must equalize the power balance. We must work collaboratively. We need to learn to be with our clients rather than do things to our clients, to control them. So this approach is non-hierarchical, it promotes choices, it's collaborative, and again, it's all about empowerment. And then I'd also like to look at the phase-oriented approach to working with trauma, where we titrate the exposure to the trauma using Judith Herman's idea of phases. There are now 4 phases: stabilization, processing of trauma, integrating the trauma, and the role of justice and stigma and social injustice that is often accompanied with people who are the survivors of sexual violence. And emphasis will also be placed on looking at our role in the therapeutic work. So we need to be very aware of ourselves, our own history of trauma, our own history of sexual experiences. We need to be aware of our biases and our core values. And the aim really is to ensure that we can provide a safe and secure place where survivors are heard and listened to, where they're respected, where we honor their need for self-determination, and we offer them dignity, all the things that were missing when they were children, these unmet needs. And to do that, we are going to look at the importance of cultural humility and the importance of epistemic equality, where we don't use our privilege, our knowledge, our models as a way of imposing those on clients. We try to work towards having some equality in that. And last but not least, we'll spend some time right at the end to make sure that we look after ourselves to minimize the risk of um, burnout and vicarious traumatization. And this is an essential component. And if we can do that, then we can turn this sometimes very demanding and very challenging work into something that is transformative, not just for clients, but it's also transformative for us, as it reminds us of the resilience of the human spirit. I very much look forward to meeting you and hope that you will find this a really important, interesting day. Thank you.